What is a close read? That is the goal of this video. That's what we're doing in this course. We're reading closely. You're going to need a shovel. You're going to need a pen. You're going to need to write things down. I really think you cannot perform a close read by simply listening to a text. If you are listening to a text, and in previous videos I have said, please listen to the texts because I think they'll help you read. I think you should, if you can, listen to the text while you read the text so that you can write on your own copy. If that is not an option for you, then be writing as you are listening and really listen closely. Close reading is not beach reading. It's not reading for pleasure. It is looking at the words. It's looking at the structure of a text. It is really digging into what you've got on that page in order to come up with some kind of argument. So close reading refers to reading and rereading. I think that is such a key component of close reading, is reading again. Reading and rereading a text in order to understand, interpret, come to conclusions, and even reinterpret the ideas within a text. So you might read a text once, say when you're 12, and say, oh, this text or this book is about X, Y, and Z. And then you might come back to it again when you're 22, say, oh, you know what, I like that previous interpretation, but now I have a new one, because maybe I, as a reader, have new experiences and new understandings of certain connections that I didn't see before, that I didn't make before. And then you come back 30 years down the road and you're 52, and you read it again, and you have even new interpretations of a text. That is close. Close reading is interpreting and analyzing and figuring out what it is the text is telling you, whether the author means for that to be the case or not. I think that is one of the things about close reading that many students, even myself at times, struggle with. Well, am I reading too much into this text? Did the author really mean for this to be the case? Here I am as your instructor saying that doesn't matter. I don't believe, and there's plenty of literary theories out there that would disagree with me, including my own colleagues. I don't believe that what an author meant the text to mean matters at all. It's, for me, all about what you pull out of that text and what you can prove that you're pulling out. If you pull out exactly what the author meant, that's wonderful. But if an author says, no, I didn't mean that, that doesn't make an interpretation of a text any less valid. So take that with a grain of salt if you want to. Close reading is intense analysis. I mean, it's like reading with your shoes on, not reading at the beach. You can read any text, even texts that were generally just meant for entertainment or not to be like included in the literary canon. You can read any text using close reading strategies, and in fact it's really fun to read texts that you wouldn't think to do a close read for because they're more like popular literature. It's really fun to close read those. Reading with a purpose, I guess you could say. So how do you close read? Really, you just need to read it with an open mind. Read it again with a pencil. First things first, annotate as you read. So what does annotate mean? Hopefully you know this already, but if you don't, underline, highlight, make marginal notes. If there's words you don't know, you should just kind of write down a quick definition, have a dictionary, go look it up on your phone or something like that. Anything. So just make a note in the text of anything that surprises you, anything that you think is significant, anything that makes you ask questions. Look for, the next slide is going to be look for patterns, but I'm going to talk about that here. If you're reading and you start to notice that the author's repeating herself, repeating himself, repeating themes, or there's a connection, there's something funky happening, highlight that. Put a star next to it. Do you love the way that a sentence is worded? Put a heart next to that. Maybe it means nothing. Maybe you won't incorporate it into your interpretation or your analysis, but read it and read it again and mark it down. And there are certainly a number of strategies that go even beyond just what I'm telling you here in terms of highlighting using different colors to make connections between certain themes compared to other themes that you would highlight in other colors. But I think that for the purposes of sort of a survey British Lit class, this too much, although you certainly could. So what you're doing as you're annotating is you're looking for evidence. The text is sort of like your crime scene, and you're saying, all right, something happened here. What is it? What can I gather in order to figure out what's going on? And so you might find a fingerprint or two here, a couple of strands of hair over here. You might, find some pieces of bone up here or something like that. But you're gathering evidence, and eventually you're going to use some of that evidence or you're not. So what happens next? Again, look for patterns, look for similarities, look for repetitions, look for contradictions. If the author seems to be contradicting themselves, contradicting society, if the character seems to be contradicting another character, if the character seems to be contradicting the author's viewpoint or worldview, if you know of it, that is so crucial. Those are the things in texts that tell us there's something here. Why is the author emphasizing? Why is there italics here? Why is there a big break in the text when the author's never done that before? Why does this page not have any words on it? Things like that. What is the author doing? And what are they trying to tell us? Again, whether they mean to be telling us that or not doesn't really matter in my opinion. No pattern is too small. If you're like reading, you're saying, I'm noticing something here, but I don't really know if I'm just reading too much into it, annotate it. Highlight it, circle it, underline it, put a sticky note on it if you don't want to write on your book. If you notice it, you notice it, so make a note of it. What is the process of close reading step 3? So you're annotating. You're starting to recognize patterns. You're picking up on the patterns that you've noticed. Now you need to ask questions about the pattern. So this is the last step of close reading. Ask questions. What did I notice during my second read that I didn't notice the first time? That's always an interesting question. Why did the author attempt to bring our attention to this pattern? So I see this, this, and this. I wonder what that says. Like, why is the author emphasizing this? What is it that the author is emphasizing? Even more importantly, why? How does this excerpt from the text fit into the whole poem, story, or essay or book? So sometimes you might just be doing a close reading of just a passage. Sometimes you might be doing a close reading of a poem that actually was published in a collection of poetry, and so it's really just a piece of the pie. If that's the case, consider the whole as you're doing your close reading, because that might help you better understand what is going on in the text and what that means for the theme or the meaning of the text. And then also along those lines, what is the text trying to tell us? Whether the author meant it or not, what do you gather from the text? And again, whatever your answer to that question is should be able to be proved by the evidence that you found at your crime scene, which is, again, the text. Okay, so I want to give you an example of kind of like how this works. So I'm going to read you this poem. And the poem has a really long title. It's written by Charlotte Smith, who's one of our romantic poets. And the title is On Being Cautioned Against Walking on an Headland Overlooking the Sea Because It Was Frequented by a Lunatic. Okay, interesting. I assume, based on what I know by the romantic poets, that this was an actual experience that Charlotte Smith endured. So she writes, "Is there a solitary wretch who hies to the tall cliff with starting pace or slow, and measuring, views with wild and hollow eyes its distance from the waves that chide below? Who, as the sea-born gale with frequent sighs chills his cold bed upon the mountain turf, with hoarse, half-uttered lamentation lies, murmuring responses to the dashing surf? In moody sadness on the giddy brink, I see him more with envy than with fear. He has no nice felicities that shrink from giant horrors wildly wandering here. He seems, uncursed with reason, not to know the depth or the duration of his woe." Okay, so that's the poem. I want to close read it. So what I did, and I've obviously done this part already, but what I did here is I read it again. My first reading, and even as I'm reading this verbally out loud to you guys right now making this video, I don't really understand what's going on. So there's a guy, and he's outside, and the lady's writing about him. So what? So then I kind of read it again and really kind of try and figure out what's going on. First things first, I don't know what the word highs means. So I've got to look it up in the dictionary, and I went to Google, and highs means to go quickly, or high, to go quickly. So what she's saying here is there, she's asking a question, is there a solitary, lonely wretch, right, who goes quickly to the tall cliff? So it's like this guy, is there actually a guy who runs up a cliff? How's his pace? Is he running? Is he going slow? Does he have wild and hollow eyes? I mean, imagine that. Anybody watching about all this really interesting serial killer documentaries that are coming out lately, and they're always talking about crazy eyes? I think that's what she means here. And you can write things like that down. Obviously I'm not handwriting on the screen, but maybe I would interpret wild and hollow eyes as my own current contemporary word for that, which is the best thing I can come up with, crazy eyes. What I did notice is she then starts to not just classify this person, but to give the person a pronoun, a masculine pronoun. So she says he, him, his. So we know that she assumes this lunatic is a man. I also noticed as I was reading that there's a lot of emotion paired with the fact that she's assuming the lunatic is male. She's a female author. She's writing about a male. He is italicized. I think this is really interesting because, and I don't know what to make of this at this point. So I'm here in my process. I'm close reading. She italicizes 3 words: he, nice, and felicities. I think through italicizing he, she's trying to say something like, he, not me, him, this guy over here. I don't know yet though. And then she's talking about location, which I don't know if I'm going to end up analyzing, but she's on a mountain, there's sea waves, there's cliffs, so I picture this very British looking, the moors, but there's actually a big cliff. So now I've pointed things out, I've noticed things, it's time for me to ask questions about the things I'm noticing. So here's what I've got, some statements and then some questions. The speaker of the poem seems to be reflecting on the strong emotions of the lunatic, lament, moody, giddy, envy, woe. Are these her emotions, or are these the lunatic's emotions? And then I ask myself, is she the lunatic? Okay, so if she's the person that's going up this hill and someone says, hey, don't go there, there's a lunatic that comes here, is it possible that she's actually the solitary wretch, that she is the him, she's the speaker? I don't know, but maybe I want to look into that. Again, I'm close reading. I also want to know, okay, so she says this word envy, right? I see him more with envy. Now, does she mean I have envy when I think of him, or does she mean I see him with envy, he has envy? I don't know. Again, I don't know the answer to this question. So I guess I have, if the speaker is jealous of this man, then she feels as if she cannot be alone on a mountain cliff having emotions. Okay, so this lunatic can be alone having emotions on a mountain, but she can't. Why does she feel like that? Why can't she do that? Is there some historical stuff I can bring in, maybe? And then my next question, is the speaker of the poem pointing out some form of women's repression? And so I think as I'm asking these questions, I think they're building on themselves to get to this final question. And an answer to that question is probably a really solid thesis statement that I can then use to write a paper for. So this is step 2. Really the question at this point is what now? So you've done a close reading, and I'm going to ask you to do close readings throughout the course, but what do you do with those? You have annotations, you have patterns that you've noticed, you have questions about the text. Now what? Close reads create your papers. I mean, really, when you do a close read and you start to ask questions about a text and then you can answer those questions, that's how you're going to get the arguments for your paper. That's how you're going to create a thesis statement. It's how doing a close read, again, it's how you find the evidence. So it's you at the crime scene. The crime scene is the text. That's the metaphor I'm going with here. And you're digging and you're pulling things out and you're saying, all right, I'm collecting this stuff here. I don't know how it's going to come into play for me to make my argument in court later, but I know I'm probably going to need it. And if I don't, whatever, at least I got it. Your annotations and your ideas can really form the basis of your interpretations of a text. So throughout the course, you'll realize that it's not enough to just have an argument or a belief about a text. You have to prove it, and you can't just talk about it. You have to show it. So you have to quote, and then you have to interpret the quotes and explain them and dig through them and sift through them and make connections for your reader, because they shouldn't have to do any work. They should just have to read and understand. So really the close read is the meat and potatoes of your argument, your discussion, and your papers. So I hope that this quick lecture video has helped you better understand how to do a close read, give you an example, and then kind of show you some trajectory of what to do next. But if you have any questions, please let me know. My email is my first initial and my last name, losburn@mitchellcc.edu.